Hello, everybody. My name is Brennen Bliss. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm thrilled to be here as part of the Travel Trends AI Summit, diving into what we're seeing in the world of large language models and how travel companies are staying relevant as they continue to take over the search and discovery landscape. I'm going to go ahead and get my presentation up and running here. Let's see. Will it work? Did it work? Yes. And I'm going to try not to block the screen to the best of my ability. We will see how effectively I can accomplish that. I think I've got that over here. So what we're going to be looking at today, again, is how large language models, and I'll put myself on this corner because I think that'll be easier. There we go. Is going to be how large language models are stealing essentially your travel bookings and what you can do to stay relevant in those situations. Because frankly, things are changing and rather quick at that. And I want to show you what we've been seeing. So you may have seen me present this before. This is not new material, what you're seeing on these next couple of slides. The rest thereafter will be. But what we look at as search and what search used to look like was this. We'd go to Google, we'd search something, see a list of blue links, right? And we all know that's not the case today. If you remember a year or so ago, or a year and a half, maybe two now, we started getting these AI overviews. We started seeing them in the US, they got rolled out globally. And AI overviews as a concept are just fancy featured snippets, frankly. And mind you, Google, and the reason I use Google is not because it's me being blind to all the other platforms for research, planning, and discovery. It's more so the fact that I would say it is the most highly captivating platform for travel research, planning, and booking right now. It is where nearly, if not more than 50% of trips start or in some point interact in the planning process. And that's data from Focusrite, that's data from Expedia. There are so many data points that show us how critical Google is, and that's backed up by the fact that the travel industry is one of Google's largest spenders on advertising. And that goes without saying that I think it was $2, $3, $4 billion across a single quarter in the past year that Booking Expedia spent on Google ads. So I'm talking about Google for that reason. It is the center of travel research still. This is the future of search, what I perceive to be the future of search, rather. It's what Google calls AI mode, and I'm sure you've already interacted with it once or twice, if not more. It's pretty visible across all of Google's surfaces, but it's essentially a large language model in Google. And it is multi-turn, it's a conversation, it's not a single question. You go through a process of research and planning all in this conversation. And it's happening to a lot of travelers. Mike Coletta, who's a research manager at Focusrite, or senior manager of research innovation, I want to give him the credit that he's due. He quoted that over 22% of active US travelers are using search engines, that are using search engines are seeing AI generated results. We do anecdotal measurements every so often. And since then, we've continued to see that nearly 65% of people searching for travel and travel related queries on Google are seeing AI generated answers just in that AI overview itself. So what that's doing is it's blurring the phases of the traditional funnel. Whereas travel used to have research, planning, booking, dreaming at the beginning of that, then research, planning, and booking as these distinct phases that take place over an estimated 120 days, according to Expedia's path to purchase research. We're seeing that in our research here, which I'll talk about in a second, all of that is happening in a cycle in one conversation. So who am I? I'm Brennan. I'm the founder of a company called Propelllic. We work with about 60, well, more than 60 travel brands on marketing, advertising, and manage approaching about 9 figures in ad spend, as well as 30 people on the team. And this year I've spent about $1 million in R&D costs on understanding how to show up in large language models. So that's what I'm here to present today. And one of those things that we've spent some of that money on is research. And what that research is in this case is we got 42 real world users, which is statistically significant for a user experiences study. It's about 3 times the minimum we needed to be statistically significant. And we asked them to complete 7 travel related planning tasks. So let's go book a flight, book a cruise, those types of prompts. And we had over 300 user tasks experienced over hours and hours and hours of video, 71,000 words of transcripts that were transcribed and coded to understand what people were seeing and doing. And we found some really interesting things. And that's what I'm going to share with you. We've got 15 minutes, so let's dive in. Number one, you know how when you go to Google and you search for your flight, you're going to see a lot of OTAs, online travel agencies? Well, it's interesting in AI mode, this new surface of Google, which I do foresee will be the future of search, and that everything that, if you go back on this slide, you see from Google CEO Sundar Pichai, as AI mode features work, Google will continue migrating those features to the main page of search, and the things that work will keep overflowing to AI overviews and then to the main search experience. So Google's validated this, what I just said. And in the current rendition of AI mode, there's a significant preference for operators over OTAs. It's interesting because that's the exact opposite of the paradigm that we see when we're searching in Google. And this is great because it gives operators an upper hand. Now, I don't know that this will stick. This is the current rendition, again, the current iteration of Google's AI mode. But today, operators are much more visible than OTAs in AI mode. Another interesting finding is there's this thing called Google Business Profiles, or formerly Google My Business. And it's that side panel that you see where it says Disney's Grand Floridian Resort and Spa on the right. And it's not something that really OTAs can use. It's a individual local business profile managed by that business, only able to be authorized and created by that business technically. And that seemed to be the primary surface that people interacted with when they were using AI mode. So when you click on a listing, any of these, you're not going to get the website. You're going to get Google's side panel here, which is a business profile, which I would say is exciting because that gives us as operators, and if you're in that case, in that state, you have the ability to actually control what people see. But that also reminds us there's a lot of surfaces that we don't actively manage, including this one. So we need to make sure that we're updating it because it is what people see first when they are researching through AI mode now. Another interesting thing we found was the credibility boost. AI gives your brand a significant credibility boost and a halo effect because people that search, even more so on ChatGPT and Google, when Google recommends something through Google's AI mode, they have inherent trust of that thing. It has an organic experience, is what it feels like, is what we heard in the user interviews. So that means show up here and the conversion process will be a little bit easier. So what does this mean for traditional SEO? Well, I think that means we're instead of looking at keywords, we're looking at prompts as what we're optimizing for. Instead of looking at pages, we're looking at chunks of content. And I can talk a little bit more about that if we have time or follow up. If anybody's curious, feel free to check out LinkedIn and shoot me a message and I'll send you some details on this. But we look at the ability for a large language model to crawl the website versus just a search engine. And then also mentions, branded citations, co-occurrence, which means how often does your company show up next to the concept you're targeting online. Those are going to be taking place of large language models, taking place of backlinks as we optimize for large language models. Now, I don't want to get too deep into this because I do want to be very clear. SEO is not gone. SEO has not gone away. I would say probably at most 5 to 10% of your business to be created from optimizing for LLMs or SEO. It's going to be more so on the organic side where you're going to get the 90 to 95% of the revenue acquired. But it is something to pay attention to. Don't give up your organic strategy, but start working on and looking at this generative engine optimization side of things. So here's what I see as the opportunity for people who operate businesses and also OTAs, also aggregators and distributors. Number one, if you can be just like with SEO, a source of new, fresh information, you are able to be cited. And just like with organic, the more accurate, the more authoritative that information is, the more likely it is to reference you. Now, that's anecdotal. I don't have data to substantiate that, but I would say that if large language models over time are going to try to surface accurate information, you being a source of that accurate information will help you in the long run. Number two, you don't have to be booking.com to succeed here. We've seen companies that are very small perform exceptionally well on topics where they're the subject matter expert, and the depth and trust matter more than scale. Your authority can beat your size if you know one destination really darn well. Your talking points can outweigh that of a very large OTA aggregator or distributor. Structured content. So it's interesting the way that these large language models work. When they come to your website, they don't just scrape the whole page and index it like an organic search crawler would. Instead, they're coming to your website and breaking it down into pieces that it can work with. And those are called chunks. Chunks are typically a paragraph, two paragraphs, maybe even a title or a heading. They're structured and enclosed groups of content that are small enough to where the large language model can manage it in the way it processes things and turns it into what's called vector embeddings. So the important thing to take away from this is if you've got a bunch of paragraphs on your page, right, and you have the opportunity to write a whole story or a whole narrative about a topic, you don't want to start with a long, lengthy intro and then continue to kind of like build out without giving full context of the topic. If you're talking about Peru, you want to go straight into the fact that Peru is where Machu Picchu is, for instance, or adjacent, right? These are the concepts of chunking, and what I mean to say here is don't take your website as a literature opportunity. It is not something that you need to write in old format English with long, long sentences and long paragraphs and long topics. Be Talk to your consumer, talk to large language models the way you would want to easily read and digest information. And what that means is start with the topic, answer the question in the same paragraph. Don't make someone read for a mile to get the answer. Large language models are going to break that content up and lose the context, and it's not going to be able to be cited because it doesn't actually hold any meaning when it's trying to be cited. And here's some of the things that you can be working on and doing today. So number one, that Google business profile, what I spoke about, is go log into that and make sure that it has all the accurate information about your business. If you don't have one, go create one. If you're a multinational business without any in-person operating locations and you're just an OTA, not just an OTA, but you're an OTA, it's unlikely that you'll qualify for a Google business profile. So you'll not have this opportunity. But for those of us who are running hotels, for those of us who are running airlines, for those of us who are running tour operators, multi-day or single day, if you're in a specific location with your business, if you've got a location for your DMC or whatever it may be, you can establish a Google Business Profile entity, which qualifies you for showing up as a cited reference that can be clicked on in Google's AI mode. Number two, remember how I talked about chunking? The idea of chunking where a large language model can pick apart a piece of your website or a page and get the individual concepts within that and index those as part of retrieval for when someone asks a question. The thing I want to communicate here is we don't need our content strategy to focus on a single page to a single keyword. We can answer a lot of related questions in a single page because large language models are actually looking at things at the passage level, not at the page level, which gives you free opportunity to go and have fun with a page that actually is written for value rather than just to target a specific keyword. That's one of the things I love about this is it's bringing back some of the traditional points in marketing of know your customer, speak to them the way they want to be spoken to. Don't just do the things for the robots. Unfortunately, the way that large language models are indexing things is it's lending itself to a world in which we can have this more natural type pieces of content. So the other thing is you will see one negative review of a company on the internet. And if somebody asks a large language model about that company, it's going to go find it. The large language models typically try to reference fairly comprehensive good and bad when somebody asks about the quality of something. So lean into getting positive indicators of your business being a strong, good business as much as you possibly can. There's nothing you can really get you can't really do anything honest and ethical to get rid of an honest bad review online. But what you can do is notice that you might have 100,000 reviews on TripAdvisor. It's a made up number, but just an example. If you have 100,000 reviews on TripAdvisor and none on Google, on your Google business profile, or none on another rating website, go diversify your positive influences because those positive influences can help somewhat drown out the negative ones and also reinforce the large language model's accepting the fact that you are recognized as a quality operator or a quality source of travel information. The other interesting thing that we found was that when people search in a large language model, specifically AI mode was where we did our study, and they search for a hotel with certain dates for a certain occupancy, and then they click through to the website for the hotel, and the hotel website just starts over and they land on the homepage and they have to fill out all that information again. That's an unpleasant user experience. But the interesting thing we found was that instead of blaming that on Google, which frankly it is, there's no process that Google has to hand that information over other than potentially an AI agent like Mariner in the future. They blame it on the brand. So they blame it on the hotel. Doesn't really make a lot of sense, but there is no solution to this yet. The only real solution right now is have a very large content base of your website, have a page for every date, uh, every occupancy count, every room type, which is not practical. I'm using hotels as an example just because it's easy, but you can extrapolate that to any segment of travel. But as we see things become available, whether it's things that are not as applicable in this scenario, like model context protocol, as we see things in the space become available, be an early adopter, be the first to use them with the resources that you have available, because that will give you preferential treatment in large language models if you are using the tools that they make available to you. Um, Moving ahead, we've got credibility signals. Talked about this a little bit, but get cited as many places as you possibly can. I have started investing in PR again after years of not doing it because historically with performance marketing, I was thinking that standalone PR wasn't really driving significant outcomes. It was not what we needed as a B2B operator at the time. Today, a little bit of a different scenario. There's this concept of what's called co-occurrence, and that's how frequently I mentioned this earlier, how frequently your brand name, in our case, Propelllic, shows up next to what you do, in our case, marketing for travel companies. So I want to show up online as frequently as I possibly can with the term Propelllic marketing for travel companies somewhere within a few words of each other in the same chunk. What that's going to do as large language models train and get to know things, they're going to reference and understand that the more frequent that occurrence is, the more likely that it is the right answer when someone searches for the top travel marketing companies, which is why if you go search that on large language models, something like ChatGPT or Google, it's very likely you'll come across Propellic. Structure your site for AI crawling. This is an interesting one. So we've all, if anybody's focused on or invested in SEO, you've probably spent some time trying to make sure that your website is accessible to crawlers like Googlebot. Now it's interesting. At first, at first, the large language models were outsourcing their crawling to operators like Common Crawler, which is an open source crawl database of the internet. Over time, they've started building their own crawlers, thereby accelerating their speed and the amount of work that the amount of crawl that they can accomplish to train their models. The issue with these, though, is there are three technologies that make your website generate. The first one is that it takes, interestingly, well, here, HTML is the content on your website. CSS is the design. JavaScript is the functionality. All three of those things come together to build a beautiful web page that's interactive. Now, Google sometimes will check all three of those, what's called render all three of those and create a full page. Large language models by and far, ChatGPT specifically is the one I'm referencing here, only renders the HTML, only pulls the HTML. So if a lot of your content on your website is dynamic and it depends on JavaScript, the large language models are not seeing that. So make sure that your website can generate well without JavaScript enabled. And what that'll do is make sure that you get included in training data when those crawls occur. And then never stop experimenting. Um, be the traveler, see what travelers see. Know that every traveler has different user profiles. So they're going to have different context in their large language model. It's going to know different things about them. So if you ask about who does the best tours of the Eiffel Tower, for instance, and it says, and you own a tour company that tours the Eiffel Tower and it references your company, it very well could be because it knows that you own that company or because it knows that your travel preferences align with that company. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to try with logged out behaviors to understand and see what people are seeing, use your friends' accounts, experiment, and don't stop trying things. That's the main takeaway here. And then there's tools that you can use to monitor that. There's things like peak.ai, Scrunch, Profound. There's a lot of ways that you can measure and monitor and iterate on where you're showing up in large language models. It's a very early industry. I would say, whereas we're at 100% of knowledge with what we're doing with SEO, I think the industry is at a 2 out of 100. And I think we might be at a 3, maybe, having spent so much time, money, and effort this year on trying to figure out how to show up in large language models. If you're curious, though, on the research that we performed, the one where we recruited, nearly 50 users and spent a very significant amount of effort in getting them through a very specific set of research prompts where we were able to see how people research, plan, and book with AI mode. You can download that at propellic.com/research. And if anybody wants to follow or stay in touch, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. It's just Brennen Bliss. Thanks so much for joining today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the event.